Welcome to episode 4 of The Rundown. I'm your host, Dr. Sam Zender, and today we're talking about all things motivation and reward circuitry in our brain because that's really the base foundation for establishing good habits in the health and fitness space, really in any domain in life, but especially health and fitness. And I wanted to touch on this because it's something that comes up a lot clinically with clients and even outside of the clinic. I see it all the time on social media. I see it all the time on various podcasts that I listen to as well, is this idea that, yes, I think we know a lot of the society knows just on an intellectual level steps that they can take or that they should take to live more healthily or, be more active or eat better food, for example. But it's just really hard to find the discipline and the motivation to do that, right? This idea of motivation or not having it is a big barrier for a lot of people. So I think it's important to first recognize that establishing habits is a process. It's not something that comes on instantaneously, but there is actual like true psychological and neuropsychological science and techniques behind how we do this, how you establish good habits. A lot of people, I think, unfortunately, think that motivation. They feel like the motivation is this kind of mythical force. It's this thing that like some people have it and some people don't. It's like a superpower. And yeah, certainly, there's going to be something to be said for genetics or just the way that people are born and their environment early on in their development, shaping that part of their mind. Many people are not as disciplined as elites, for example, at whatever industry or sport or activity you're talking about, and that's what separates those people, right? Is that combination of the mental abilities with the physical. But the idea that it's just something that people are born with and other people just don't have it, I think is false, or at least it's not the whole truth, because there are very real components in our brain, very physical structures that we can change, and that we can affect and grow and become stronger with the right system in place. Motivation fades over time. It's not something that is inherently present for everybody. Even the most disciplined person that you might look at as motivated in whatever setting you want to, I promise you they're going to have days and moments when they don't feel like doing a certain thing. One name that comes to my mind is David Goggins. Many of you in this space are, I'm sure, very familiar with him. There's plenty of other names you could pick. But I love some of his previous interviews that he's had where he's made it clear that it's not about always wanting to do whatever task is in front of him. He's done some extreme. I mean, he's like the number one you know example of discipline and motivation, if you will, that I can think of doing hard things in general. But he's made it very clear, like it's not really about feeling like doing it. There's going to be tons of days when you don't feel like doing it, and that's really what we're trying to combat here is by developing a system that makes you feel almost obligated, or it becomes a natural part of your psyche, a natural part of your schedule to do the things that you know are good to do and that you should do, even if you don't feel like doing it. So let's start with just the basic psychology of what's going on, the neuropsychiatry, if you will. There's a structure in our brain, or a system, if you will, several different structures called the basal ganglia, or basal nuclei, I believe is the more modern term. And we won't get too technical with it because it's a little bit dry. But point is, these are different structures that have a circuit that do a couple different systems or a couple different structures or a couple different processes, excuse me, one of which being our reward system and dopamine being the main chemical in this process. Many of us have heard that term dopamine, but maybe you're not familiar with exactly what it does. Well, in the function of the basal nuclei in our reward circuit, essentially dopamine is the feedback mechanism, or provides a feedback mechanism for our brain and our nervous system to say, hey, this thing that just happened to us or that we did, this was good, we want more of it. Or if we don't get that dopamine feedback, then our brain, our nervous system essentially says, okay, whatever just happened is not desirable. And we see this not just in health and fitness. This is, again, in all aspects of life. One of the more frequent and more maybe ubiquitous ways that we see this nowadays is social media. Ironically, probably how you're watching this or listening to this right now. Our algorithms and our apps right now are designed to essentially hijack this reward system where you see something that you like and your brain immediately gets that dopamine burst, and that sends a signal then to the rest of your brain and to your nervous system that says, hey, we want more of this. This is a good thing. let's make ourselves more receptive to this in the future. And that's what a process we call upregulation. So essentially, then you have these sensory fibers and ports, if you will, in the brain that will latch onto dopamine or dopamine attaches to, and this spurs on this reward circuit more. Well, the more exposure we have to that, the more our brain says, "Oh, we gotta open up more access to this signal, to this dopamine." And so now we have more of these areas of our nervous system and our brain, more of these sensory fibers that want this dopamine then, which just creates a more positive feedback loop that says, "Oh, we need more and more of this." In this case, social media. So the idea of doom scrolling, right, really comes from that. Is this idea that, well, we've kind of hijacked our reward system to say, well, I like when I scroll and I like when I see some new content, and maybe there's some specific kind of content that you're looking for. Your brain is highly adaptable to that. And the more you do it, the more you want to do it, right? Positive feedback loop, in that case, not necessarily a healthy way to create it, but it's maybe the most tangible way that many of us can perceive what is this idea of a reward circuit. It's important to then apply that to health and fitness. And let's just pick exercise to start with, right? A lot of people will feel like, well, it's tough to motivate myself or feel motivated to get out of bed in the morning or to do it in the afternoon or do it, when I get home from work. Maybe you got young kids, for example, or whatever it is. You're just like, you don't feel motivated, you don't have the energy to do it. That's not wrong. That's not bad. It's not that you're not born with some inherent magical force and you're just kind of doomed to be, quote unquote lazy. I'm doing air quotes here, people, if you're just listening on Spotify. I'm not calling you lazy, of course, but that can feel a bit disheartening to ourselves if you can sort of audit that process mentally and you feel like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I'm not cut out for a healthy lifestyle. Couldn't be further from the truth. What we have to do, though, is just realize that there's a system that we have to hijack more positively in order to make it feel more automatic and to help you feel more disciplined. And the challenge is that this takes time. This is not something that one repetition is going to create a brand new habit for. I mean, nobody really has done anything once. Rarely does it happen. Does it happen once and a new habit is formed? I would say an extreme example of that might be like drug abuse, for example. Some drugs are very potent, and that creates such a strong reaction in that reward circuit that your brain essentially can't help but go through that upregulation process. But that's, again, more artificial. And the day-to-day task, the day-to-day side of things, where we're not really going to form habits just from doing something once or not doing it once. It takes repetition. A lot of studies that I've seen, anywhere from 60 to 70 repetitions consistently, not spread out over, 10 to 20 years, of course. But let's say 60 consecutive days or 70 consecutive days of doing something is when it starts to become more of a habit. And I think that's important to recognize, right? It takes repetition. It takes a certain amount of time you're going to dedicate and recognize that I need to do this thing. I need to hold myself accountable. I'm not going to feel like doing it every day. It's totally natural, again, normal, good, psychology to go through that growth process. There's not anything wrong with you at all. This is just the process you have to go through to actually form a literal network in your brain that right now maybe not doesn't exist around a certain task. But after so many repetitions, your brain will get that feedback of saying, oh, this actually is something that we do want. This is desirable. This is an action that we enjoy doing and we want to continue to do it. So how it goes into, or how it applies to exercise, is going to be, again, through that repetition. But what's the first step in getting to that point of it being more natural and us being more disciplined? There's a couple different techniques that you can try, and the three that we'll go over here today are ones that I think are very simple and effective. They're ones that I've used personally. I know a lot of other people that have used it in their daily lives, but there's countless examples out there. So this by no means is an all-inclusive list. A lot of this has to be individualized, and that's kind of the beauty and in some ways the beauty and the challenge of it, is that there's not one perfect solution for all people. If there were, how easy would it be for us to just snap our fingers and apply this one solution that is perfect for all people? But the beauty of it is that it can be adaptable. You can do certain things that fit your life specifically that maybe the person next to you didn't use, but you don't have to do things the exact way that they did. You just have to be open to that change and open to exploring that. Which sort of leads me to a second segue before we get into the strategies is first recognizing before you try to go through some option or try to implement some change in your life is recognize number one, do you honestly feel like there is a problem in, let's say, the health and fitness part of your life? And what do you feel like needs to change? I mean, in the therapeutic realm and physical therapy school, we talk about the idea of motivational interviewing. This is something that I like to use clinically in certain instances, not super frequently, but depending on the situation or the population I'm working with, it might be more relevant. And it's really just the idea of taking individuals through a stepwise process of getting to know their insight into what the issue might be. Number one, do they recognize that there's a problem or not? If they don't, that being the initial starting point, we call that the pre-contemplative phase. That's the, by definition, point that they have, they're before contemplating if there's an issue, right? They don't necessarily recognize that there is a problem per se. And by nature of the motivational interviewing process, we go through the the interview with questions and just answers that kind of guide us into recognizing, like, okay, whatever decision it is that you're making or not making, it has an effect, whether that's good or bad, or whether it's just for themselves or for people around them. But if you can do this by yourself, I think this is also helpful too, to an extent, right? Now, if you're listening to this or watching this and you're having the thought of, oh yeah, there's definitely some things that I should change or that I need to change in my life, but I just don't know how. You're not in that pre-contemplative process. You're in the more contemplative, where you realize, like, okay, something needs to change, and I recognize that, but how do I do that, right? And so make sure that you're in at least that second phase, or whoever you're talking to, maybe somebody in your life, family or friend is in that first phase. Because if they're not, and you feel like you are just kind of speaking to a wall, you're not really getting anywhere, from the psychological aspect of it, again, they may not be open to a solution or you just throwing solutions at them if you haven't established first that there is a problem and how that problem really impacts anybody around them. So in the health and fitness realm, recognizing that your decisions, good or bad, are going to directly affect obviously yourself, your family, your friends, your employer, your employees, depending on what part of the staff you're in, really everybody around you, even just, people you walk past on the street or in the store, right? You're going to carry a certain amount of, carry a certain energy. You're going to carry a certain, emotional package, if you will, that is going to impact people, good, bad, or otherwise. And obviously, the physical benefits kind of speak for themselves too. So, making sure you address that there is an issue first. That's going to be step one. And how do we change that? Again, there's a couple different techniques. The first strategy that I like to use, or that I would suggest, is starting small. And I recommend this to clients, whether we're talking in more of a fitness aspect or talking more of a rehab aspect of getting out of pain or managing pain if it's been more chronic. Nobody typically is going to thrive in an environment where everything changes at once, myself included. I'm very much a creature of habit in general. Humans tend to be that. That's, again, how our brains are wired, where we pick up on patterns very well and we say, hey, this thing or this environment or this stimulus, whatever it is good. I want to keep doing that, versus this other stimulus over here is not good. I want to stay away from that. And you pick up on the patterns of what goes well, and you want to stay engaged in that. That might look different for everybody, but that's naturally how our brains are operated. We're very good at recognizing patterns and then differentiating what is a good pattern versus a bad pattern, at least to oneself. Okay, so starting small is going to be critical. If we start large and we try to change multiple things, or we make huge drastic changes, typically that's where things fail, because that takes quite a bit more willpower to overcome that change. It's almost like quitting cold turkey, smoking cold turkey, let's say, for example, just a more tangible situation. It's certainly possible. Many people do it, and I have people in my life that have gone through that. It's not easy to do. And to take somebody who's maybe 30, 40, 50 years in their life and hasn't really been healthy or fit, or maybe you're that far in life, but it's only been a couple years since you've been paying attention to your health and fitness, and then just to tell them, oh, do a 180 and completely flip everything, that's not usually sustainable. And maybe you get on a kick like a New Year's resolution, and you're back in the gym for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever, and then eventually it dies out because we've not really trained effectively that positive feedback mechanism in our brain to say, okay, this is a change that I like, that is sustainable, that gives me a positive outcome, and this is something I want to keep doing. Usually, large changes are going to require a lot more, again, willpower or create more stress than benefit, and they're not typically things that are sustainable. So, in the health and fitness realm, let's say with exercise, would I suggest somebody go from doing no exercise per week to doing 5 days per week of an hour or 2 hours? Definitely not. And actually, even from a physical therapist perspective, that probably would create more harm than good, anyways. Your tissues, more on the mechanical side of things, musculoskeletal side of things, they've not adapted to that stress you're putting it on under. And now you're going to go from 0 to 100, and oftentimes that can create injuries related to overtraining. Mentally, you're going to probably become much more fatigued and overtrained and exhausted and irritable and potentially anxious and depressed, and that's not a good thing. Of course, that's not something that our bodies are designed to adapt to. It takes time. So pick something small. If you don't have a consistent routine right now, maybe you pick literally 5 minutes a day and you do it 2 to 3 days a week, right? You're talking 10 to 15 minutes a week. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we can all afford to do something, right? Does that even have to be that high intensity? No, definitely not. Pick it, make it as small as you want to make it. If you want to just go for a walk, if you want to literally walk twice around your house, and that's more than you had been doing, fantastic. Good for you. Start there. Try to do that 2 to 3 months every day, 2 to 3 consecutive months, and see how much easier that becomes when you start small and build from there. Now, over time, again, if you want the most results, then you're going to kind of stack onto that and keep adding a little bit more. Maybe you go from 5 minutes to 10 to 20, so on and so forth. Or, if you pick, let's say, a strength training routine, maybe you pick 2 exercises or 4 exercises, and then you slowly build from there, slowly adding weight. Again, the examples go endlessly, but from a truly neuropsychological perspective, neurophysiological rather perspective, that is what your brain is wired to do. It's wired to take these small changes and build on them versus trying to revamp your entire life and make massive changes over time. So make small changes, build on that, and watch the results speak for themselves. Another strategy, and I use this second one a lot with nutrition specifically, is to design your environment around whatever habit it is that you want to build. I'm a sucker for Oreos. I will do anything I can if it's in front of me to get my hands on some. If you made Oreo, just give me an Oreo cookie, cheesecake, pies, whatever. Okay, I'm gonna eat that thing. But if I don't have it in the house, then I can't, right? If I don't have access to it, it's not something I can possibly overeat and splurge on unnecessarily because I don't have it. So that's what I found to do, not just with Oreos, but that's kind of the silliest example I can use. Whatever food it is, whatever amount of food it is, I have to set up my environment so that I can't fall back into these bad habits and I can only reinforce these good habits, right? So I can't possibly overeat or I can't possibly splurge on things that I recognize are not healthy for me to do consistently when I set up my environment to make sure that it's not in front of me. So if it's nutrition for you, then do the same thing. Try to not have it in your house at all. Maybe you live with roommates, you live with family, and they want it. I wouldn't recommend limiting everybody to one person's diet and nutrition. That's probably going to create issues. Certainly learned that in marriage. For myself, I cannot force my wife, nor should I, to try to eat in the exact same manner that I do, because she likes different foods than I do. And that would just be not good for a home environment. So point is, don't try to make everybody bend to your will, unless you're all trying to achieve the same goal, then maybe that works for you. But point is, if you can have it out of your house, do that. Maybe you can't. Maybe you try to set it aside and designate in your mind, okay, this side of the pantry are things that I can't touch, right? You now have a barrier that you've put there in a positive way, a positive barrier to say, these are the foods that are not for me to even think about. The more you practice just blocking it out, the easier that's going to be to limit your focus just to the kinds of foods that you are supposed to eat or that you want to eat that help you meet your goals, right? Health and fitness wise, let's say exercise wise rather, you need to again set up your environment so that your routine works well for you. So perhaps you're a stay-at-home mom and you can't get to the gym consistently 60 90 minutes or 30 minutes even. Perhaps you set up a spot in your home when the kids are busy or they're napping or whatever it is, and you can do your routine there. Again, even 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the intensity level, is going to be a very effective workout, right? If you're busy at the office, maybe you work in a corporate setting and you can't always get to the gym, if you don't have a gym in your workplace, find some time in the office, maybe around the office, just outside the building. Find a couple minutes. As we talked about previously, you don't need hours and hours a day of exercise to be effective. You have a couple minutes, but fit it into your environment that works. Smaller examples too might be like setting out your clothes in the morning or in the evening prior to then going to the gym in the morning or whatever it is, as a reminder to say, okay, this is the routine I have now. I can't miss it. Literally, I wake up out of bed and my clothes are right there. It's a good physical reminder that this is something I need to do and that I should be participating in. You make your environment conducive to forming these good positive habits so that it's not just in your head, because we can all easily talk ourselves out of things, versus if the environment around us encourages us or almost in a positive way forces us to do it, it's going to be a lot harder to break those habits. And again, those positive interactions and encounters start to stack on each other. And after 2, 3, 4 months, then it becomes something that's real hard to break. So make sure your environment is conducive to the habits that you want to build as well. And then the third one would be habit stacking. So this is really the idea that you're going to build habits on top of each other or integrate these new habits into your current one. So for example, a simple example might be that you're going to do your workout or your stretch routine or have your protein shake or whatever it is after brushing your teeth in the morning or after you have your morning cup of coffee or before you clock out of work, or maybe right after you clock out, might be a better way to phrase it, is when you're going to start your workout or start some routine, right? Integrate it into some specific thing that happens to you during the day already so that it's easier to then build on that positive reinforcement idea and build that reward circuit, because now it fits next to something you're already used to doing, right? Your brain has already built up the habit to do these small things like brush your teeth, maybe take some vitamins or any medication you might have. You have to do things right after work. Maybe you go grab the kids. Maybe you go visit a family member after work. Whatever it is, right? Take your typical day, the flow of your day, and attach this new habit to that. Still using the first 2 points to starting small and setting up your environment around it, and stack it on top of the habits you already have. It's going to be a lot easier than to make sure that you're integrating it well and it's something that's sustainable and practical. Now, can you play around with how that looks afterwards? Of course, you're not long-term committed to anything. Maybe you try something for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and it makes life harder to do, or you recognize like, oh, this does not work in my schedule. Play around with that. That's okay to explore that. I am somebody very much who has to work out in the morning because I recognize that if I wait until the end of the day, it's a lot tougher for me to feel ready to work out or to push myself mentally, versus in the morning. I recognize that fits very well in my flow. I wake up, brush my teeth, have a light breakfast, and then I go to the gym. And now that is my routine. I've stacked that, into my other habits consistently enough so that it now becomes something totally natural. And then on days when maybe you don't do that for whatever reason, and this is something that I temporarily go through as anybody does, when you have kids, that first month, 2, 3 months, maybe longer, is very much a dysregulated time of life in a positive way, of course, because you have a brand new family member, but it throws off the routine, right? So there's going to be some times in life where things, break down temporarily, but if you've invested so much of this positive habit formation early on, getting back on track is so much easier because now it feels abnormal to not doing that activity or that habit. right? Versus if this is something that is new and you're within that first 2 to 3 month kind of training period for this positive feedback mechanism, and something just derails you, then it's harder to get back on track because you're still in that kind of high discipline mode of trying to integrate this new thing in life, right? So this is really an investment long term. The sooner and the more consistently that you can make these habits in life, the harder it is to break it, and the easier it is to continue to do it long term, no matter what life throws at you. And as we've said before, life is going to throw things at you. It's not consistent for anybody. I don't care how rich you are or where exactly you live geographically or anything about you, right? Nobody's life is completely flat and consistent and static all the time in terms of challenges. Things are going to pop up in various forms. And so you might as well make sure that you are resilient enough to handle all of those stresses versus trying to avoid the stresses because they're going to find you anyway. So you might as well make yourself a stronger creature. But again, remember those 3 points. Start small, fit your environment around it, and stack habits over time onto each other. And watch that positive feedback mechanism in your brain become much more of a natural part of who you are and what you do. And the great thing is that starts to permeate into other areas of your life too. Health and fitness is one example of ways that we can apply this, whether it's the good foods or exercising properly or exercising consistently. But then you start to build up those habits too in other parts of your relationships and say, okay, well, now I'm going to maybe focus on some other new challenge that I want to, treat this person a little bit better, or I want to do some nice things for this person, or maybe I feel more motivated at work as well in my job, and my job now is more fulfilling, that sort of thing. It permeates through all other aspects of your life, and that's really what makes this a beautiful thing. Is it's not just related to exercise and nutrition. This is a psychological characteristic or trait that applies really to everything we do in life. So do the right things at a small scale first, progress into larger scale, watch the benefits multiply over time, and the idea of trying to take care of yourself no longer becomes a question of motivation or discipline. It's a complete habit that feels bad when you don't engage in that and becomes totally natural, and you feel much better doing it long term. So build some good habits out there and help others around you start doing the same.